And of course, our author, thanks for joining us. And my partner in crime, Darby, thank you for being there to partner on this. Welcome, my friends, to another exciting edition of Meet the Author. We are just a month or so away from hitting the 10-year mark for Meet the Author, which is crazy, crazy. How does something like this last 10 years? But it just does. So we have a great author for you today. I want to give you some information on some upcoming events. Let me see if I can do a little share screen here. Let me pull this up. All right. Got it. Meeting is now being shared on Facebook, so everybody behave yourselves. All right. Share screen. Boom. Share. So here's what's coming up. Dr. Brian Glibkowski, he is August 7th. He will also be with us on Zoom. His book is called Answer Intelligence, and he wants to raise your AQ. Brilliant guy. This is going to be an awesome, awesome discussion. We have a rebroadcast. My good friend Gilbert Coble is going to talk about culturally relevant financial literacy, a guide for educators, and he's really passionate about teaching our young people about money, which is awesome. And then in November, we have Patty McCracken, also a Zoom program, and her book is The Angel Makers, which is really kind of an eerie and fascinating story. So I want you to be part of that. There's another thing I want to show you. Let me see if I can just scoot over to Eventbrite. This, if you are near Philadelphia or are willing to make the trek, September 26th, we have an author panel of people who wrote books about Philadelphia. Each and every person on this panel could have their own book conversation. Fascinating stuff. But I really think you'll enjoy. You can interact with them. There will be 8 of them. They'll be selling and signing books. We're at the Pyramid Club. Have a glass of wine, get some hors d'oeuvres, and make some friends. So that is coming up on the 26th of September. Now, Darby, is there anything that I missed that you can think of?
Oh, sorry. I think we're good. Okay. Everybody can go to meettheauthorpc.com to see all of the upcoming events.
Very nice. So here today, while we enjoy our lunch, or if it's not lunchtime for you, we just enjoy this noontime program, we have a wonderful author who's joining us, who wrote the book, The Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. And this is the truth. Like, we should know this stuff. We should have been taught, and we didn't. But Mark took the time to put this together in a wonderful book. He also created the Brain Bump app, and we're going to talk about that. So a little bit from his bio, from tracking criminals and terrorists on the dark web to creating marketplaces and new authentication systems, Mark has spent his career launching and developing new ventures at startups and Fortune 500s and in academia, with over a dozen patents to his name. Done some work with MIT. He helped start the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, dubbed MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he teaches annually. Today, we're going to take a dive into your career toolkit. We're going to talk about Brain Bump, a little bit about AI. So please welcome Mr. Mark Herschberg. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So you wrote this book. It's a great book. And you know, this is a passion of mine. We've talked about how this is not our day job, but we love helping people manage their career, find work. What prompted you to put this book together?
Going back over 20 years, when I was first a manager, I was hiring lots of people, and they were from good schools. They were smart people. They could answer the technical questions, the questions about their discipline. But then I would ask more general questions like, what makes someone a good teammate? What are the things to make you an effective communicator? I would just get these blank stares. They didn't know the answers. And to be honest, I probably didn't know the answers either when I was first out of school. And so I noticed there was a shortcoming and began to train up people within my organization. Now, around the same time, MIT was getting similar feedback. We were being told by the companies who would hire our students, yes, they're very smart and they can do the math very well, but these other skills we're looking for, leadership, communication, team building, networking, negotiating, we're not seeing it. And by the way, not just in your students, we're not seeing this anywhere. And in fact, it's not just college students, it's not just engineers, but universally, we are seeing a lack of these skills. And you have probably seen this before. You can find articles from recruiting companies, from think tanks, from people in the industry, from all these companies saying, these are the skills we want. Now, any given list, it might be 5, it might be 50. It's really all the same list. It's just kind of how big are those buckets or how small are you making them? And so when MIT heard this, they said, well, we want to address it and we're putting together a program. I heard about that from some friends. I reached out, I said, listen, I've got some training material. I'm happy to give it to you if it's helpful. And I really thought it would be a one and done conversation. But instead, they asked me to help develop more content with them and then stay on and teach. And that put me on this path completely unexpectedly.
Wow. Wow. But you mentioned that this is a need. This is why I have work. I'm telling you, Mark, this is why I will have work for the rest of my life, because these things that you mentioned, communication skills, leadership, negotiations, building relationships, these are the key success factors, right? But yet we're not really trained in any of this, let alone managing our career for life. Right. We're not trained on that either. So what is your day job? Because it's interesting. You wrote a wonderful book. You're, I think, at the deep end of the pool in career development. What's your day job?
Good question. I'm unusual because most people with a book like the Career Toolkit are career coaches, executive coaches, HR consultants. That is not me. I do not make my living. I don't want to make my living that way. And I give away as much as I can in that space. My day job, I build tech startup companies. And so I have a couple in incubation. In the meantime, I am a fractional CTO, CPO, so part-time chief technology officer or chief product officer. Companies will generally hire me for an extended engagement, typically over months. And they say, listen, we've got some engineers, we have some product people. We don't need someone like you full-time, may not be able to afford someone like you full-time, but we can use a little more senior expertise and guidance. So can you come in some number of hours a week and help us over an extended period, just at the higher level, whether it's strategy or working with the board or some key partnerships or just decisions. Now, lately, I've had a little more short-term work. AI seems to be really popular these days. No idea why. So now everyone, for some reason, they're talking about AI. And because I've worked in machine learning is a type of AI. So all my background with machine learning and my graduate work at MIT, I have lots of people coming saying, we don't need you as the CTO to be in day to day, but can you just help us think through AI? What is it? What's it going to do to our business and how this might impact us? For industry groups, I get those questions, but more, what does this mean for our workers and the labor industry? Yes. And we can definitely get into all of this in this conversation.
Yeah, well, since you brought up AI, let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll swing back to some of the career questions, because AI is impacting all of us, and I don't think everybody fully understands why this is so important, why they should care. I just learned, I was watching Fran Drescher from, she represents the union for the entertainment industry. And one of their key sticking points is the use of AI in entertainment. So if you guys haven't researched it, it's fascinating. Go out and Google that. From your perspective, tell us, how is this going to impact the workplace?
Now, first, let's just understand what AI means, because everyone, when they say AI, they mean generative LLMs, ChatGPT, and like. But AI is actually a much broader category, and we've been doing AI for many years. Machine learning is one type, and this is how we can get more targeted advertising at people, or how we can train up systems to better identify medical issues or other things. So machine learning is one type of AI. There are vision detection systems. It turns out, as you look at me, you can tell where I end and where my background begins. But computers have a much harder time edge detection and not realizing that these things aren't actually coming out of my head, but are separate items. That's a different type of problem. Natural language processing. The last few years, we all have these home devices and we can say, hey, whatever. I don't want to say the name. I don't want to turn anyone's on right now. And being able to recognize a human voice and respond and understand the words, because we all have accents. We all say things funny ways. And that's a different type of AI. Even walking, whether it's the Roomba that's rolling around trying not to bump into your furniture, or a machine that is physically walking on multiple legs, this is other type of AI. So first, there's multiple types of AI. Now, most of the discussion today is on LLMs, large language models. And let's understand what this is. A large language model basically takes a whole bunch of data, and it's built on what we call unstructured data. This is one of the key changes. Traditionally, what happened is you had a bunch of really technical people like me, and we'd take in some data and we'd have to tag it. We'd have to say, this is about a person. This is about food. Understand, food and person, these are different. And we tag it, and that took a lot of work. You'd have to have a human explaining what each thing is. But due to some recent innovations, they can take untrained, unsupervised learning, unmarked data, and feed it in. So they can say, here's Wikipedia, and I'm not going to tell you what this thing is. You're just going to keep reading and reading and reading, and it's all going to make sense. And so this allowed us to scale up, because now we don't have to have the humans, let me explain what this is, let me explain what that is. So huge innovation. The analogy is, if you're trying to learn Russian, if I just handed you a Russian dictionary and said, start reading, it will all make sense once you're halfway through.
Take forever.
Well, but in the old days, I'd have to explain the early words. We'd have our tutors, and that's intensive. I just said, read this Russian dictionary from start to finish. By the end, you'll know Russian. I now am no longer doing a lot of work. I hand you the dictionary, you do all the effort, and it magically works. And that's what's happening with LLMs. We can now give them a large corpus of data and say, just keep reading it. We're not going to explain it to you. You're going to figure it out. And so the LLMs can now respond to human language prompts and give human language responses. But there's a couple important things in the fine print here. This is what we call, it's pre-trained. So it's generative pre-trained transformer. That's a GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. Transformer is the technique that we use for how it learns. Don't worry so much about that, unless you want to get really technical. The generative, it's going to create answers for you. Now, it does so probabilistically. So what this means is that you give it input, and it's almost like complete the sentence. So if I were to say, and they lived happily, probably it's going to say ever after. And the reason it's going to say ever after is because the same reason you thought ever after. We've seen it so often. Yeah. But if you wanted it, you could imagine a writer might say, and they lived happily ever after, except for the fact that the mother-in-law, wicked queen, came back from the dead, and now they have a new thing to fear. Put in a little twist. Probably ChatGPT would not come up with that because it's so outside the domain of what it's seen over and over, happily ever after, period. So it's probabilistic. And we saw, for example, there's a famous case where a lawyer got in trouble because the lawyer said, oh, ChatGPT, write this for me. I'm going to respond to a judge's motion, write it for me. And ChatGPT is both good and bad at doing that. It's good in that the response to some motion is very structured. You know, dear judge, in the preceding case of this, blah, 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 standard format. And so ChatGPT, just like it knows happily, probably ever after. It knows, here's the format I want to put this in. Great, that's efficient. Think of it like Clippy. Remember Clippy? They would say, like, I think you're
Yes.
trying to write a resume. Put your experience here.
Yes.
Okay, it's good that way. But here's the other thing. It is generating as it goes. There is no large database. This is what trips people up. When we think of a search engine, there's a database. And you say, look this up, and the search engine says, here is the best answer. Here's what I think is the closest fit to what you put in. Here's a link. Go look at more. ChatGPT and other LLMs, there's no database. It says, okay, I'm going to guess what's the likely next word. And that works well for ever after. It doesn't work well when you're writing a memo, because in this memo to the judge, it says, in the response to this motion, I'm going to cite the following case. And now a case is typically A versus B. And so ChatGPT says, oh, I need a case here. Pick a word, any word. Johnson, that's very common as a case. I'm sure there's lots of cases involving Johnson. Oh, I can put Johnson versus, oh, I need another word, Smith. It's almost like Mad Libs. And so it picked words that probabilistically were going to be used, but obviously no such case existed. And the lawyer got in trouble. To understand there are limitations to ChatGPT and the like. So now to your question, why is this scary for some people? What does this mean? It can generate a lot of text and now images and soon videos very quickly. So there's good and bad for this, and it can do some code and other things as well. If you need basic stuff, if you need an ad, you're going to run a Facebook ad and you just need a copy, right? A line. How do I express how my scarf is really good? It can generate in an instant 10 different versions of the warmest scarf you'll ever have, so soft and luxurious. So here's a bunch of taglines. It will do that faster and better than a human. It will come up with imagery faster and better than a human. And it may not yet be quite better on some things, but it will get there soon. It's not so good at the higher level pieces. If you're trying to get to write your novel, it's going to be pretty mediocre. Right. So what we're going to see is the low end work is going to start to disappear, and all of us are going to need to change up how we think about our careers. The important thing, and sorry, I know I've been talking for a minute.
That's interesting.
Here's the important thing. It's not, is this job going to be affected or not? If you think, for example, of a toll booth collector, we used to have them, and then we got rid of them. It was very binary. On the other hand, if we look at travel agents, now travel agents, I'm old enough to remember, you'd call up the travel agent and say, well, I want to fly from New York to San Francisco, and tell me what flights are available, what airlines, what times, what cost. And they're reading off a list. We don't need them to do that. I can do it much faster and easier on my own using my own tools. That all went away. But travel agents have not gone away. Travel agents are no longer just doing the road. Well, there's a flight at 1 p.m. and another at 1:07 p.m. They're now saying, oh, you want to do a family vacation to the Caribbean? Let's talk about what destinations, what is it you like to do? Here are good times of year to go. They're doing more advanced work. We removed that grunt work. And so all of us in our jobs need to look, not the job as a whole, but the individual tasks that we do, and then understand which tasks are going away, which will be automated. And for example, all the time we take coordinating and scheduling meetings, we all hate that. We'd love for that to go away. And then we can focus on the higher value work that we deliver, but it will transform us. And in many cases, it will reduce the number of people we need working on a task. I no longer need 10 copywriters. I can get by with only 5 or 3. They'll do higher level work, but I need fewer of them. And that's the risk, one of the risks.
So clearly anybody who has not dipped their toe into the AI pool in terms of just trying to understand, take the time to do so. I really don't think there's any career path job that will not be impacted in some way. But I love your thought, Marcus. What are the higher level things that AI can't do for us? It just can't. I was at a speakers conference last week. They actually have a product that videotapes you, audio tapes you, and then they can take that image and your voice and you just type something in and it'll have you say it as if it was a videotape, which, Mark, is scary because you could make it say terrible things that, right? But that's where things are going. So
this is one of the other risks. So we have the risk to the labor market. In fact, the problem there, we see that when technology comes in, it destroys jobs and then it creates jobs.
yeah.
And usually we wind up better off. But the issue is if it destroys the jobs and takes a few years to create the jobs for the new jobs to come up. Think, for example, social media manager.
Yeah, wasn't around 15 years ago.
Right, but now we have it.
Yes.
And so that replaced people who were, say, doing TV advertising, because now we need less people to do TV advertising. So a job disappeared, a job came. But if there's a time lag, and if the skill set requires some retraining, we can have a number of people who are displaced, who are unemployed for an extended period. And unlike, well, we're having some changes to the toll booth collectors or elevator operators, all these things where it's a small number of people, we're going to have this happen across multiple industries with a large number of people. That's the risk to societal stability. Now, the other risk you talked about, we can have what's called deep fakes. We can make a video where we make you say something wrong or horrible.
Yes, yes.
So the big risk, whether it is a video itself, or whether it's just, I'm going to write conspiracy theories. And in fact, these LLMs can help me write conspiracy theories 100 times faster. Now, remember, the LLMs aren't always accurate, but it's a conspiracy theory. Who cares about accuracy? And so we're going to see a wave of disinformation, whether it's fake videos, fake audio, or just text. Just going to be a wave of disinformation, whether broadly on the internet or targeted to you as I'm trying to defraud you. And we're going to be needing new tools to help us really sort the reality from all that noise.
It's interesting. So from a job and career perspective, it's almost trying to look beyond where we are now to see what's going to be needed and how we can prepare for that. And I do want to get back to career management, because there are some fundamentals in your book that are not high tech. There are simple things. Like, what are 2 to 3 areas that, and you talk about them in your book, that set people apart from their colleagues in any field? And should be focused on? What are a few things that you talked about?
Let me give you an example of how this is impactful, and then we'll talk about some of those different skills. There's an analogy I started doing with my students, and it's a math analogy, but this is 6th grade math, so everyone should be able to follow along. Imagine, if you will, you have a rectangle that's 4 by 10, so area of 40. Think back to those word problems we had in middle school. You have to increase one side by 2 units to maximize the area. Which side do you focus on, the short side or the long side? And the answer, of course, is you focus on the short side. You go from 4 to 6. That gives us 60. The other way would be 48. Conceptually, what's happening is those 2 extra units on the short side are amplifying that long side. The 2 make the 10 even bigger. If we put the 2 on the long side, it's only making the 4 a little bigger. All of us have long sides and short sides. Many of us, our long side is our discipline. For me, it's technology. For someone else, it might be sales or accounting or marketing, whatever your area is, that's your long side. And we do have to focus on that long side. I know with technology, if I'm not learning new technology, I become a dinosaur. So I have to keep putting in the work on that long side. But that short side is how I become more effective. The overall areas are effectiveness. Now, we often meet people who have a very long side coupled with a short side. For example, someone who might really know what they're doing in their field, but they're a terrible person when it comes to explaining it. Either they can't do public speaking, and that's okay, not everyone does, Or even if it's a one-on-one conversation, they throw in so much technical jargon or they get lost down rabbit holes. It gets so hard to follow them. And you know they're brilliant. You know they're really long on that long side. But because that other side, the communication side in this case, is so short, they're very thin. It's a small area and they're not very capable. If we take this person who is technically competent, and technically that's your discipline, it's not technology, and we just help them be a little more effective in communication. Oh, now you're much more clear. Now we can have you speak to a customer. Now you can explain this to the people outside your domain. You have such a bigger impact. And so all of us have these short sides. By working on those, we get a better ROI, a better return on our investment, the effort we put in. And so the typical areas we see: communication, leadership, or management separate from leadership, networking, negotiating, even having a career plan. This is such a basic one we all screw up. Imagine if your CEO came to you and said, okay, it's January 1st, here is a critical project. I'm putting you in charge. This is 1/3 of our revenue. You have to get this done. It's due in a year. What would you do? You would probably say, okay, well, this is important. I'm going to get input from other people. I'm going to create a project plan. We're going to have check-ins. And then we're going to go along the way. You wouldn't say, okay, boss, I'll see you in a year. Cross your fingers. Let's hope this works out for the best.
Right.
But when it comes to our careers, what do? We say, well, I'd like to be a director in 5 years. I'd like to be a VP in 10. And this is 100% of my income, the vast majority of my finances. Well, I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope I get there.
Light a candle, say a prayer.
Yeah. Right. Well, if we need a plan to do this 1-year project, why is it we don't think we need a plan to do a 5-year or 10-year project? Now, what trips people up is they think, how do I know what I'm doing in 5 years? I can't plan for that. Well, on this year-long project, how do you know what you're doing on day 273? You don't. But you have a placeholder. You have some sense of where you need to be. And of course, we adjust as we go. And things nearer in time are a little more concrete, and things further out are fuzzier. The same techniques can apply to our careers. Now, the project doesn't guarantee success, or the project plan doesn't guarantee success on the project, nor does a career plan guarantee you will get the promotion, but the lack of it invites failure. And so by having this plan, by creating this plan, just like getting better at any other skill, we increase our chances of success.
So you've given me pause for thought. I have 2 questions for you. Many of us start to think about our career when we're looking for work, right? Which kind of is late in thinking about it. We should be managing our career, thinking about our career while we're still working. So what I'm hearing you say is there is value to organizations, managers, HR departments, actually training people how to do this in-house. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Like there is a value to it.
100%. Not only do we want to upskill people, there's that famous quote, what happens if we train people and they leave?
Right.
Yeah, but what happens if we don't train them and they stay?
Yes.
I would say even career planning, this scares people, because if you work for me and we're having, let's say, our semi-annual check-in, I want to talk to you and say, let's talk about your career. Let's talk about where you want to be in Amen. 5 years, and 10 years. And hey, you know what? You're probably not going to be here, and that's okay. Let's face it, 10 years from now, I'm probably not going to be here either. And that's okay. And it shouldn't be scary to admit there's a time in the future when this doesn't happen. But if we can talk about where are you going with your career, then I can help support you. I can develop you. We might be able to find you opportunities here if it's a large organization. If not, I have helped people find new jobs. People who work for me where it's like, you're leaving, I have to hire someone new. But because we've had this open conversation, I wasn't blindsided. It wasn't, oh, you're leaving in 2 weeks, I got to scramble. We knew what was coming, and I helped guide you. And that often keeps people around longer, because remember, workers today, they're not just looking for a paycheck. They are looking for companies that support them. And when you help develop them, and we can talk about how to create an internal training program for free, this is going to help with your employee retention.
Absolutely. I just working with an organization that just did an employee engagement survey, and one of the top things on their list was career pathing. And I think, and it's not a very big organization, so the actual career pathing may not be that great, but if we did something like helping people see, how do you manage your career? Where do you want to go? How can I help you prepare for that here as best I can? And then help you do what you need to do otherwise. Like that, people are looking for support. They really are. And I think they're going to stay with your company longer if they feel that love. It is going to improve engagement and retention.
They will. And remember, jobs are short, careers are long. Don't focus on the job, focus on building those relationships and helping people with their careers, because even if they leave this job, you're going to be somewhere else in the future. They're going to be somewhere else. You might cross paths again.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're thinking long-term, long game. You have an app, and I want to make sure we get this in because I was so impressed with this. I loved the book, and that was good enough. I was happy enough with the book, and they're like, oh, T, you got to go out and look at the app. Talk about Brain Bump, because we all have access to it. What is Brain Bump, and how can we use it?
Brain Bump is a completely free app you can find on the Apple and Android stores. Here is a problem I saw. I know with my students, we teach them, they go, yeah, this is great. And then as soon as the class is over, all the information goes poof.
Right.
I know when I read a book like mine, another business book, a self-help book, you read it, you say, oh, wow, this is great. This is so good. And 2 weeks later, how much do you actually retain? It's usually very little. Yeah. I would take notes on the books I read, and you can do this now with like Kindle highlights, but how often do you actually go back and look at them? I don't. Well, this is a problem. And the problem fundamentally is that where you read information isn't where you need information. The information's needed at a time and place separate from where you acquired it. So I, as an author, I'm here to help people not just buy the book, but actually learn and use these skills. So we created Brain Bump as a way for you to better retain and access the information. And so Brain Bump, it's like a cross between a book summary app, a flashcard app, and a daily affirmation app. Completely free. So here's how it works. We take content from a book like my book, and we take highlights. It's what you would go through and highlight with a marker. We have not just my book, but other books, blogs, podcasts, classes, and talks, an ever-growing set of content for you. You then have the app on your phone, and you can use it one of two ways. The first is just in time. So for example, there are networking tips in my book. Okay, great. You're going to read that at home, but you're going to need that as you go into a conference months later. So imagine if right before you walk in the door to that conference, you pull out your phone, you open the app, all the tips, all the advice is tagged by topic. So you hit networking. And then what happens? There are all the networking tips. And you go flip, yep, okay, do that, okay, yep, okay, good. 2 minutes before you walk in the door, you got what you needed, when and where you needed it. So it takes all the information from this content and puts it right in your pocket for easy access. Now, the other mode, there's foundational stuff. If you're trying to be a better manager, or later when we add things for relationships, you're trying to be a better spouse, you can't just say, oh, wait, hold on, I have to go look something up. You need to retain it. And we know spaced repetition is how you retain it. That's a fancy word for looking at things again. It was why we opened the book before the test a few times. What the app does, because who has time to open an app? The app lets you set up a daily reminder at a time you set. So for example, I might want a management tip at 9 a.m. each day as I go into the office. I don't even have to open the app, just at 9 a.m., little pop-up. Oh, there's a tip, great. Swipe it away, done. But seeing it over and over, 2 seconds a day helps me to remember it. Because now I keep saying, go, yep, okay, good. And once I've seen it a few times, I'm going to retain it better. Now, we don't send any notifications you didn't request. We all hate getting things we didn't want, pop-ups on the phone, spam emails. So you control what you get and when you get. But the app, again, completely free. And if you go to brainbumpapp.com, you can go and see links to the store and download it. We have an ever-growing set of content. And in the 2.0 version coming out, we're recording this in July of 2023. It should be out towards the end of August 2023. In the 2.0 version, if we don't yet have the book that you want, because there's a lot of stuff out there, don't yet have the podcast you want, you can add the tips yourself. You can even import tips from Kindle if you've been highlighting. So Brain Bump, completely free app, and it helps you better retain and access what you learn.
Why did you do this, Mark? Because there's no charge for the app. I can attest to that because I have it, and it is incredibly helpful. Why did you do this?
I mentioned earlier, you normally think of people like me who say, oh, I've got this book and now I'm a coach. That's
Right.
not what I do. I build tech startups. This is passion. This is fun. My passion is helping people with their professional efficacy. And one of the reasons I don't coach is then I could only help one person at a time. I'd rather hit a larger group. If you go to my Career Toolkit website, I give away resources for free. I could charge you and say, oh, I'll help you do this. Nope, here you go. It's free. Take it. You do it. It's like to help more people. With the app, we can help more people. And that's really my passion in life. So I'm happy to give away the app for free.
My gosh. Well, this is awesome. And you are what I call a go-giver. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Go-Giver, but you are a go-giver. So, but you are getting something back, and that is joy. There is a joy that comes with sharing this with others, and you are creating some joy. So let's talk about, there's one appendix in the book that I enjoyed so much, and I want to talk about that. Why are we not taught this stuff, Mark? You know it. I know it. It's important. Everybody who is here listening is like, this is important stuff. Why are we not taught this?
Thank you for reading the appendix. Most people don't. I feel like that's kind of interesting. It goes back to the history of education. If you look at high school education, high school is a relatively modern invention going back about 100 years or so. And high school was designed to give you the 3 R's, of reading, writing, arithmetic, to just get you to function in the world. And we were fine, if we go even before high school, we were fine living on the farms, and we learned from our parents. We learned how to plant crops, or if you were a woman, you learned how to sew and cook. I know that's sexist, but 150 years ago, that's the world. And then we said, well, now people aren't on the farms, they're going to the factory, and they have to read the sign saying, danger, do not touch. They have to be able to count how many screws and how many bolts, and then what's the difference and how many more of one do you need? So we had to give them basic math. And that's what high school taught us. And that was fine for the types of jobs we did. You didn't need to have networking skills to work a union factory job. Now, the university system, that goes back almost 1,000 years. And the university system, it's run by professors. Wonderful people, very smart, not always the most practical people. When you go to college and you say, I want to study marketing, what do? Well, the marketing professors, the experts with PhDs say, we, the experts, have decided you have to take these intro classes and some intermediate, and then pick some advanced classes. Oh, and the college will probably give you some general stuff, a language, a science, whatever else. If you do all this, we're going to give you a degree. And the degree says marketing or accounting or whatever your field is. All the degree says is you have learned a sufficient level of knowledge to get this degree.
Right.
It does not say you are good at marketing. It does not say you are a good employee. It just says you have this knowledge. And in the 1950s, when we were cogs in a machine and you sat at your desk and your boss said, here's something in your inbox, and you work on and you put in the outbox and you say, what next, boss? That was okay. We were cogs. We just had to know marketing or accounting or whatever a narrow role was. But today, and really the last 30 to 50 years, depending on how you look at, we have transformed the workplace. It's no longer you are the cog and your boss just tells you what to do because your boss doesn't have time to do it. In fact, today, the head of marketing looks at the 24-year-old and says, so TikTok, what is it? How do we use it and be good? Because I don't understand, but you 24-year-old know more than I do about this. And so we went from top down, I'm going to tell you what to do because I know more than you, to
I do all the thinking.
yeah, all of us are starting to contribute. And so now how we engage, it's a lot more teamwork and communication and these other skills. But unfortunately, the university system moves at a glacial pace.
Yes, it does. We could talk about that over Kleenex and a beer. I'm telling you, it does move at a glacial pace. So, wow, good information. I mean, it frustrates me to see that we are not changing as fast as we need to change, because this is something, I don't think it's that complex, really. It just needs attention and someone to share it. Now, I know in putting together this book, there are a number of experiences you've had and stories along the way that drove some of the content. Share with us a story or two that led to some of the content in your book.
So many to choose from. I'll tell you one of my favorites. It has to do with understanding our own personal brand. And these are topics you've probably heard about them elsewhere. I touch upon them because this book, by the way, it's an overview. It's very condensed. Each chapter gets right to the point. I try not to put in a lot of fluff. And you can find a whole book on personal branding. But here's the essence of how it works. Years ago, I was down interviewing for a job, and I'm there, I'm wearing a suit because that's what we did back then. And I'm in the break room with people. We haven't started the formal interview process yet. We're chatting and we're talking about corporate culture. As we're having this conversation, a woman comes in and she's listening to the conversation for about 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, she says, so by the way, are you just like some business guy, or do you know anything about software? I said, well, actually, 2 of my 3 degrees from MIT are computer science degrees. She said, oh, that was it. That's the mic drop. Boom, right? I'm gonna pull out the MIT. I didn't mean to cut her off like that. I was, oh, here's my credibility. But it was, you hear the thud. And I realized at that moment, I have the ability to convey, I had indications of this earlier, to convey that I am a technical guy. I've had people look at me and say, well, this is very complex stuff. Oh, but you went to MIT, you can handle it. Fact is, no one looks at me, someone with a degree from MIT, and says, oh, this math is a little hard, or you might not be able to understand the technology we use here. They go, oh, you've got that. Everyone just assumes. I might not be able to, but they assume. I broadcast that. Now, I do so through that degree, but there's other ways you can broadcast it. Degrees are one, experience is another. Oh, you worked for McKinsey, you worked for Google. Oh, you must be smart. Oh, you have a blog on this topic. You have a book on this topic. You must know this. So we can broadcast something, but there's also things we don't broadcast. No one ever questioned, could I do the math? But Mark, you don't know leadership or business strategy. That's not what they teach at MIT. You're a tech guy. Yeah, we'll give you all the tech problems, but you don't know this other stuff. And so I recognized I had a brand that was very strong in one area, but not strong in another. And for the jobs I wanted, it was very important for my brand to convey that I had the skills needed. This applies to all of us. We all have to understand, what is our brand? How are we perceived? And there might be good things and bad things. It's not bad that people think I'm really technical. Hey, that's nice. But if they're not seeing those other skills, they're not going to think I'm capable of the other role I wanted. So understand your personal brand, look at the gap between where your brand is, where it needs to be for the roles you want, and then close that gap.
And then create the experiences to demonstrate leadership, proficiency in whatever. So we can't just rely on degrees and books. I've had folks come to me with 2 master's degrees and they're looking for work. And they're like, T, should I go back to school and get another degree? Now, by all means, if you enjoy school and spending money, go forth, make that happen. I said, you know what? Make some friends, build your network, volunteer in an organization so people get to know that not only are you smart and have this degree, but you're nice and you're fun to work with and you get stuff done and you problem solve. So Mark, love your thoughts on branding, because it is not just about our degrees. It is much bigger. What's another story you have? Because you said you had a bunch of them.
Yes, trying to pick the right ones. Another story, this gets into how a lot of people misunderstand what it is we do for work. If you think about how we were trained in college, in high school, there was a very well-defined problem. Your teacher or professor said, here is some homework and do this problem, put the answer in the box, or write a report and the report needs to be this many words and double spaced and look like this, and write up your thoughts on Shakespeare or whatever you're being asked to do. It was a well-defined problem and you had everything you needed to solve that problem. If you're doing a report on Shakespeare, well, here's the book. If you were doing a story on the Civil War, okay, here's a library, there's some references. If you're doing a math problem, well, everything you need to know is there. The teacher's not tricking you saying, haha, I hid some information. It was all right there. And so I was very good at solving problems and doing the work, as many of us are. When you get to the office, your boss doesn't say, here you go, here's a well-defined problem, and give this to me. You need to understand, what is your boss really asking for? Did your boss give you all the information needed? How do you want to deliver? It's not just getting the right answer, but conveying the right answer. And I remember one experience, I had a boss, I was in this job for a couple of weeks and things weren't going well. There's first confusion, where my boss said, I showed up and in the first week I'm there, one of our offshore development partners had a plan for how they're going to change things up. It was a good plan. And then 2 weeks later, my boss is mad at me. Oh, why are you mad? It's like, well, you don't have a plan. I said, oh, I showed up, I saw a plan from this team. It's a good plan. I agree with what they're saying. So I thought that was fine. I didn't realize you wanted a plan for me. It's like, yes, of course. That's why we hired you. He never actually said, I want you to give me a plan. He thought it was implied. Okay. I said, no problem. I will get you a plan. Now, just so I'm clear, what are you looking for? Do you want me to write up a project description? Are you looking for a timeline, maybe a budget? Do you want me to do a PowerPoint presentation to you to give you what I'm thinking of? Do I just send you an email? What are you looking for? He said, I don't know. At that moment, I said, time to update my resume and go look for jobs. Because if my boss didn't know what he wanted, the odds that I will be able to deliver are pretty slim. And so in training, in high school, in college, all sorts of school, we have well-defined problems where it's clear how to succeed, how to get the A. In the real world, we don't. And we have to put in some work defining the problem, making sure we're doing the right thing, not just getting the right answer, but also conveying it the right way. And if you can't define the problem, you're probably not going to give the right answer, or at least not the right way.
That's a great lesson. And a couple things that you learned there. One is being clear on what, and I always say it this way, what does good look like? So if I had your boss, I'd say, imagine I've completed what you've asked for and you are delighted. What does that look like? And of course he's, I'll know it when I see it. And I've had a boss like that. You were smart to get your resume together and go. This is a communication issue at its foundation, is just being clear, making sure, asking more questions. So many times we nod our head, we took a few notes and we think we're ready to roll. And you weren't ready to roll. You thought you were. Great lesson. So I've posted in the chat, gang. If anybody has a question, you can post in the chat. I'm happy to bring you on screen if you want to ask the question. But I want to ask Mark, what's coming up for you? What's new? Like, you're moving and shaking. You've got all kinds of cool stuff going on. And with AI, dude, you could be busy for the rest of at least the next 3 to 5 years because you know it well. But what do you have coming up that we should know about?
Well, I have Brain Bump 2.0 that we mentioned. So Brain Bump, it's live now. You can use it now, but in the 2.0 version, again, you can start to add your own content if we haven't yet add the content you want. We'll continue to add content too, but it's just more functionality. I do have a startup I'm working on related to AI. I can't talk too much about it yet, but we talked about some of the challenges AI will bring, and we've got some tooling to try and address this and mitigate those challenges. But certainly in the meantime, the work I do as a fractional CTO, CPO, and especially it continues to be a lot of requests for AI advice and consulting. So that's keeping me busy.
Yeah.
I mentioned something earlier and we didn't yet get to it.
Okay.
So I'd like to circle back because I always like to make sure we follow through. I mentioned a way that you can develop and train up your entire organization.
Yes.
And this is one of the resources that I give away for free. So we just put in the chat, the careertoolkitbook.com. That's the website, the careertoolkitbook.com. And if you go to the resources page, everything there is completely free. In fact, the stuff you download, I don't even ask for your email. I have an email list and one day I'll actually start mailing it, but I don't need to collect your email because I'm not trying to sell you anything more. So you can download this stuff for free. Now, we mentioned you want to train up and develop your employees, and there's a method that you can do. This is how we are teaching these skills at MIT. This is how top business schools teach the skills. And it's through peer learning. Because the thing about these skills, it's not just memorizing. If I'm teaching you chemistry, here's a periodic table, here's how atoms react with each other, write this down, memorize it. But if I'm teaching you basketball, I can teach you the rules in 30 minutes, 60 minutes. You're not ready to play basketball.
Yeah.
You have to practice. And so you want to drill and scrimmage and get coaching and watch the tape and reflect. And that's how we learn. And that's how we need to learn these skills. Now, wait a second, you wrote a book. Yes, I'd love to be able to coach you one-on-one. That doesn't scale. The book is a starting point, but don't just use the book. So peer learning groups is the best way to learn this. I'm going to walk you through how to do it. Again, there's a free download. It's the first download on the resources page. You want to create teams of people, groups of people within your organization, typically about 6 to 8 people in size, but there's ways to scale it up. And if you're at a small company, say, well, we're only 5 people, we're only 12 people, go find other small companies, because you don't have to do this with people in your company. You can do it with people across your company. You can create a local meetup group. If you're a solo practitioner, create a local meetup group or find your peers. And what you want to do is take some content, read it together or watch it together. So yes, you can use my book. You can use other books. You can use videos. You can use things like this. You can use articles. Doesn't matter where it comes from. But you say, we're going to all look at this material on leadership or on networking or on whatever the topic is you're trying to develop. And after we all consume the content, we're going to discuss it. It's almost like a book club. And in this discussion, let's say we're talking about leadership. I'm going to share, well, here's how I interpreted that. And you're going to share how you interpreted that. I'm going to say, oh, you know what? I never thought of it that way. Now, maybe that means, oh, I'm going to try what you're saying. Maybe I say, your leadership style is not for me, and that's okay. But now I understand you look at it differently, because these skills are multifaceted. There's no one way to do it. So understanding the multiple perspectives, that's key. That's where the growth comes in. So it's in that discussion, that's where we really get into that deeper understanding. And then someone could say, well, here's an example. I gave you stories of how I learned skills, and people in the group would give examples. You go, oh, that's enlightening. Someone might even say, here's a challenge, maybe a current one. You might not be able to do that if it's your peers in the company. You don't want to talk about, I'm having trouble with my boss. Talk about, here is an issue at a prior company, or here's an issue my friend is having. And as we think through it together, that's like doing a case study in business school. This is how we scrimmage and practice. Because I can't practice at work. I can't say in my team, hey, I'm going to try leading in a totally different way. And then 2 days later, when I totally screw it up, I go, okay, time out, do over, doesn't count. Everyone forget the last 2 days. Doesn't work like that. But in this group, oh, well, what if we approached it this way? I might try this. And I was, well, I tried that, and here's what worked and didn't. So it's in this discussion that you learn. Now, here's the great thing about doing this. You actually get 4 benefits. The first, you are upskilling your team. You're developing these skills, and that gives you better colleagues, employees. Second, you're increasing retention. This is what we talked about earlier. People want not just a paycheck, they want companies that develop them. Third, you're increasing your internal networks. We often think about networking for finding a job, but networks can do so much more. And internal networks within a company, really important, because you want this group to not just be all the engineers and all the salespeople and all the whatever. You want to split it up across the teams. You're increasing that internal networking. And fourth, you're creating a common language, a common framework. If your book is good to great, then once we've all done it, I can say hedgehog model. And you go, yeah, I know exactly what
that is.
So you get all these benefits. There's no cost. Maybe you're buying a book for people. And by the way, if you use my book, there's also a way, here's how we break down the book for different objectives. But if you don't want to use my book, use a different book or use free resources online. There's no real cost, and you get all these benefits, and it's all completely free. You can implement this yourself. You don't have to hire me. You don't have to buy anything. Do this at your organizations.
It's amazing. So I'm hoping that everybody is taking these links. If you see at the bottom of the chat, the 3 little dots, if you click on that, you can do save chat. It'll save all the links for you when you leave. We're gonna do one quick question. It's 12:59. Sharon posted, what is the size of the Brain Bump library currently, and how does it work to get content into the library?
We've got a couple score pieces of content. And so content is a book or a podcast, not an episode, but a set of episodes, or a blog, not a single blog, but a set of blogs. Got a couple score in there now. It is growing. And of course, because we're not growing as fast as some would like, people can add their own stuff for content creators. So if you are an author, a podcaster, a speaker, a course instructor, a blogger, if you would like to get your content in there, reach out to me. If you go to brainbumpapp.com, on that page, at the bottom of the page, there's, I think it's apply here. There's something that says for content creators. Fill out that form, it takes 30 seconds just so I get your email. I know what it is you have. You'll give me a link to your website. Send that to me and we will be in touch. You can, of course, reach out to me on the Career Toolkit book.com or LinkedIn or other websites. Brain Bump app is probably easiest, but just reach out to me. We'll talk about getting your content onto the app because we are growing and always looking for more content.
Cool. Mark, this has been fascinating. I can't believe how fast that hour went. It felt like 15 minutes. And thank you, my friends who joined us today and participate in the chat group. If you haven't read the book, get the book, read it. If you're a career coach, you want this to be part of your library, and you certainly want the free tools that we've pointed to. I personally am going to spread the word about the tools for the peer learning. I think it's very rich. I think companies should be doing this anyway, right? So good stuff. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Darby, for helping us in the background. And so we conclude another wonderful Meet the Author. Thank you, everyone.